I was hired to guard a warehouse. The night shift has one rule: don't look at the boxes. You ever take a job you know is going to be weird, but you do it anyway because you need the money? That's how I ended up here, sitting in a folding chair in the middle of a freezing warehouse at 2:13 a.m., clutching a thermos of gas station coffee and trying not to think about the boxes. Especially not the boxes. I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly in a position to be picky. I just lost my job at the auto shop, my rent was overdue, and my phone was blowing up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably bill collectors. So when I saw the ad online, night security needed, immediate start, no experience required, $30 per hour, cash paid nightly, I didn't even hesitate. I called the number, and a woman with a clipped, businesslike voice told me to come by that evening for an interview. The warehouse was on the edge of town, past the last gas station and the old drive-in theater that's been closed since I was a kid. The building itself was nondescript, gray concrete, no windows, a single metal door with a keypad. There was no sign, no company name, nothing to indicate what was inside. I remember thinking it looked more like a bunker than a place of business. I parked my beat-up Civic in the gravel lot and walked up to the door. Before I could even knock, it swung open, and a man in a security uniform stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of stone. He didn't smile. "You here for the job?" he asked. That I nodded, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Yeah, name's Tyler." He grunted and stepped aside, motioning for me to enter. The inside of the warehouse was even colder than outside. The air smelled faintly of metal and something else, something sharp and chemical, like ozone after a lightning strike. The only light came from a row of fluorescent tubes overhead, flickering and buzzing like angry insects. The man led me to a small office in the corner. Inside, a woman sat behind a battered metal desk, typing on a laptop. She looked up as we entered, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Tyler, I presume?" she said, and I nodded again. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." I sat. She closed the laptop and folded her hands on the desk. "This is a simple job," she said. "You walk the floor every hour, check the doors, make sure no one gets in. You don't need to worry about what's in the boxes. In fact, you're not to look at them at all. That's the only rule. Don't look at the boxes. Do you understand?" I blinked. "Don't look at the boxes?" She nodded. "That's right. You'll see them. They're stacked in the center of the warehouse. Don't approach them, don't touch them, and above all, don't look at them. If you can follow that rule, you'll get paid. If you can't, you'll be asked to leave. Simple as that." I glanced at the man standing behind me. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. I looked back at the woman. "What happens if I accidentally look at them?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just don't. It's for your own safety." I should have walked out right then. I should have thanked her for her time and driven home, even if it meant another night of ramen noodles and ignoring my landlord's calls. But $30 an hour, cash, no questions asked? I told myself it was just some weird company policy. Maybe they were storing sensitive materials or something. I told myself a lot of things. I took the job. The woman handed me a clipboard with a checklist: doors, windows, perimeter. She gave me a key card for the main door and a walkie-talkie. "If you need anything, call me on channel 1, she said. "I'll be in the office until sunrise." The man, his name was Frank, I learned, showed me around. The warehouse was bigger than it looked from the outside, a vast, echoing space filled with rows of empty shelves. In the center, surrounded by a ring of yellow caution tape, was a stack of boxes. They weren't marked, just plain brown cardboard, but there was something about them that made my skin crawl. I tried not to look directly at them. Frank stopped a good 10 feet from the tape. "That's as close as you get," he said. "Don't cross the line. Don't look at the boxes. You'll be fine." He left me at the far end of the warehouse, near a space heater and a battered folding chair. "Your shift starts now," he said. I'll be back at 6. And just like that, I was alone. The first hour passed slowly. I walked the perimeter, checked the doors, tried to ignore the way the shadows seemed to shift and stretch in the corners. The boxes sat in the center, silent and unmoving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me. I told myself I was being ridiculous. They were just boxes. At 1 a.m., I made my second round. The warehouse was silent except for the hum of the lights and the occasional creak of the metal beams overhead. I kept my eyes on the floor as I passed the caution tape, but I could feel the boxes in my peripheral vision, like a weight pressing on my skull. I made it back to my chair and poured myself another cup of coffee. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was just the caffeine. At 1:37 a.m., the walkie-talkie crackled. "Tyler, this is Ms. Grant. Everything all right out there?" I jumped, nearly spilling my coffee. "Yeah, all good. Just quiet." "Good. Remember the rule?" I swallowed. "Yeah, I remember." The walkie clicked off. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. I played a few rounds of solitaire, but I kept glancing up, half expecting to see someone or something moving in the shadows. At 2 a.m., I started my third round. As I passed the caution tape, I heard a sound, a faint, scratching noise, like something moving inside one of the boxes. I froze. The sound stopped. I told myself it was just a rat, or maybe the building settling. I kept walking, but the sound started again, louder this time. Scratching, then a low, muffled thump, like something heavy shifting inside the cardboard. I stopped, my heart pounding. I wanted to look, just for a second, just to see what was making the noise. But I remembered the rule that don't look at the boxes. I forced myself to keep moving. I finished my round and sat back down, my hands clammy and cold. I stared at the floor, willing the minutes to pass. At 2:27 a.m., the lights flickered. Just for a second, but long enough to make my heart skip a beat. When they came back on, I could have sworn the boxes were closer to the edge of the caution tape. I told myself I was imagining things. At 2:45 a.m., the scratching started again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. I pressed the walkie-talkie. "Miss Grant, there's something moving in the boxes." There was a long pause. Then her voice, calm and measured. "Don't look at them, Tyler. Whatever you do, don't look." I gripped the walkie so hard my knuckles turned white. "What's in them?" Another pause. "It's better if you don't know. Just follow the rule. You're doing fine." The walkie clicked off. I sat there, staring at the floor, listening to the scratching and thumping. I tried to count the seconds, to focus on anything but the boxes. I thought about my rent, my empty fridge, the way my mom used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Anything to keep my mind off the growing sense of dread. At 3 a.m., I started my next round. The scratching had stopped, but the air felt heavier, thicker, like I was walking through water. I kept my eyes on the floor, but I could feel the boxes in my peripheral vision, closer than before. I hurried past them, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. As I reached the far end of the warehouse, I heard a voice. Faint, almost a whisper, coming from the direction of the boxes. "Tyler." I froze. The voice was soft, almost childlike, but there was something wrong with it, something hollow and echoing. I told myself it was just my imagination, the product of too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But then I heard it again. "Tyler, come here." I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. I pressed the walkie. "Ms. Grant." There's a voice. "I think someone's in here." No response. I tried again. "Ms. Grant." "Frank?" "Anyone?" Silence. I looked back toward the office, but the door was closed, the window dark. I was alone. The voice came again, louder this time. "Tyler, look at us." I squeezed my eyes shut and stumbled back to my chair. I sat down, pulled my knees to my chest, and tried to block out the sound. I hummed to myself, an old tune my mom used to sing, anything to drown out the whispering. After what felt like an eternity, the voice stopped. The warehouse was silent again, but the air felt charged, electric, like the moment before a storm. I checked my watch. 3:17 a.m. I still had almost 3 hours to go. I tried to focus on my breathing, to slow my racing heart. I told myself I could make it. Just a few more hours. Just follow the rule that don't look at the boxes. At 3:30 a.m., the lights flickered again. This time, they stayed off for almost a minute. In the darkness, I could hear the boxes shifting, sliding across the concrete floor. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes squeezed shut, counting the seconds. When the lights came back on, the boxes were right up against the caution tape. I could see their shadows stretching across the floor, long and twisted. That I pressed the walkie again. "Miss Grant, please, I need help. The boxes, they're moving." No response. I thought about leaving, about just walking out the door and never coming back. But I needed the money. I needed this job. I told myself I could make it. Just a few more hours. At 3:45 a.m., the scratching started again, louder than ever. I could hear something inside the boxes, something big, pushing against the cardboard. The tape around the boxes started to peel away, curling up like it was being pulled from the inside. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes fixed on the floor. I could feel the boxes watching me, waiting. At 4 a.m., I started my next round. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. As I passed the caution tape, I heard the voice again, louder, more insistent. "Tyler, look at us, please." I kept my eyes on the floor, but I could feel the pull, like a magnet dragging my gaze toward the boxes. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. I made it back to my chair and sat down, shaking. I checked my watch. 4:07 a.m. Just 2 more hours. I tried the walkie again. "Miss Grant? Frank? Please, someone answer." Silence. I stared at the floor, listening to the scratching and thumping. I thought about my mom, about pancakes and Sunday mornings, about the way the sun used to shine through the kitchen window. I tried to hold on to that memory, to keep the darkness at bay. At 4:30 a.m., the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back on. I sat in the darkness, listening to the boxes moving, sliding across the floor. I could hear them breathing, a low, rasping sound that filled the air. I pressed the walkie, but it was dead. I was alone. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, clutching the dead walkie-talkie like it was a lifeline. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. I should leave. I should get up, walk to the door, and never look back. But every time I tried to move, my body refused. It was as if the cold had seeped into my bones, freezing me in place. Or maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the knowledge that if I stood up, if I made a sound, the boxes would know. I tried to focus on my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale. I told myself that if I could just make it to sunrise, everything would be fine. The sun would come up, Frank would return, and I'd get my cash and go home. I could forget about this place, forget about the boxes, forget about the way the darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides. But the darkness didn't care about my plans. Somewhere in the blackness, I heard the boxes shifting again. The sound was different this time, less like cardboard scraping on concrete, more like something wet and heavy dragging itself across the floor. I pressed myself harder against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. Then, suddenly, the scratching stopped. The warehouse was silent, so silent I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I waited, barely daring to breathe. That's when I heard the whisper, right next to my ear. "Tyler." I jerked away from the wall, heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel something there, just out of reach. The air was colder now, so cold it hurt to breathe. "Tyler, look at us." The voice was everywhere and nowhere. echoing off the concrete walls, seeping into my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not looking." A soft, wet laugh echoed through the darkness. "You will." I don't know how long I sat there, knees pulled to my chest, rocking back and forth like a child. Time lost all meaning. The only thing that mattered was not looking, not giving in to the pull. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is the sound of footsteps echoing across the warehouse floor. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. Maybe Frank was back early. Maybe Ms. Grant had come to check on me. But the footsteps were wrong. Too light, too quick, almost skittering. I held my breath, listening as they moved closer, circling around me. "Tyler." The voice was different now, higher, almost playful. I felt a cold hand brush against my cheek, and I flinched away, pressing myself harder against the wall. "Don't you want to see what's inside?" the voice whispered. "Don't you want to know?" I shook my head, eyes squeezed shut. "No, leave me alone." The hand withdrew, and the footsteps moved away, fading into the darkness. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then I heard the boxes moving again, sliding across the floor, closer and closer, that I forced myself to stand, legs trembling. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, but the screen was dead. No light, no signal, nothing. I took a step toward the door, moving as quietly as I could. The boxes were between me and the exit, but I told myself I could make it. If I kept my eyes on the floor, if I didn't look, I could get out. I took another step, then another. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something sweet and rotten, like fruit left out in the sun too long. As I neared the caution tape, the boxes began to shake, rattling against each other. I could hear something inside, something big and heavy, slamming against the cardboard walls. "Tyler." The voice was right in front of me now, so close I could feel its breath on my face. "Look at us." I kept my eyes on the floor, focusing on the yellow tape. Just a few more steps, and I'd be past them. Just a few more steps, and I'd be free. But then something grabbed my ankle. I stumbled, nearly falling. I looked down, and in the faint light from the emergency exit sign, I saw a hand, pale and thin, with too many fingers wrapped around my leg. I kicked out, hard, and the hand let go. I scrambled backward, heart pounding, and pressed myself against the wall. The boxes were shaking violently now, the sound echoing through the warehouse. I could hear voices, dozens of them, all whispering my name. "Tyler, Tyler, Tyler." I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sound. I wanted to scream, but I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, something would crawl inside. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered back on. For a moment, I was blinded by the harsh fluorescent glare. When my eyes adjusted, I saw that the boxes were right in front of me, stacked in a perfect circle around where I stood. The caution tape was gone. I stared at the floor, refusing to look up. I could see the edges of the boxes in my peripheral vision, could see the way they seemed to pulse and shift, as if something inside was trying to get out. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move. One step, then another, keeping my eyes on the floor. I could see the exit now, just a few yards away. That's when I heard the sound, a low, guttural growl, coming from inside the nearest box. I froze. The growl grew louder, rising to a roar. The boxes began to shake, slamming against each other, the sound deafening. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't care about the rule anymore. I just wanted out. I reached the door and slammed my keycard against the reader. The light turned green, and I threw myself outside, gasping for air. The night was cold and silent. I stumbled to my car, fumbling with the keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there, breathing hard. I looked back at the warehouse, half expecting to see the boxes following me, but the building was dark and still. I told myself I was done. I told myself I'd never go back. But as I sat there, trying to calm down, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. "Shift isn't over, Tyler. Come back inside." I stared at the message, heart pounding. I looked back at the warehouse. The door was open, just a crack, as if inviting me back in. I should have driven away. I should have left and never looked back, but I needed the money. I got out of the car and walked back to the warehouse. The door swung open as I approached, and I stepped inside. The lights were on again, but the boxes were gone. The caution tape was back in place, and the warehouse looked exactly as it had when I first arrived. Ms. Grant was waiting for me by the office door. She looked me up and down, her expression unreadable. "Rough night?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She handed me an envelope. "Your pay. You did well. Most people don't make it through their first shift." I took the envelope, my hand still shaking. "What's in the boxes?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, that same cold, empty smile. "You don't want to know." I left without another word. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I told myself I'd find another job, any job, even if it meant flipping burgers or scrubbing toilets. But the next night, I was back at the warehouse. The money was too good, and I was too desperate. The second night was worse. The boxes were closer this time, stacked right up against the caution tape. The scratching started as soon as I walked in, louder and more frantic than before. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on my rounds, but the voices wouldn't stop. "Tyler, look at us." I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices were inside my head now, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I saw things in the shadows, shapes that didn't belong, eyes that glowed in the darkness. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing there. PT 3 a.m. The lights went out again. This time, I didn't move. I sat in my chair, eyes squeezed shut, listening to the boxes moving, sliding across the floor. I don't know how long I sat there. Time lost all meaning. When the lights came back on, the boxes were gone. Ms. Grant was waiting for me by the door, another envelope in her hand. "You did well," she said. "See you tomorrow night." I took the money and left. I kept telling myself I'd quit, but I never did. Each night, the boxes got closer. Each night, the voices grew louder. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I stopped answering my phone. All I cared about was making it through the night. One night, Frank didn't show up to relieve me. I waited for hours, but he never came. Ms. Grant told me he'd quit. I was alone now. The boxes were right up against my chair, so close I could feel the cold radiating off them. The voices were louder than ever. "Tyler, look at us." I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. I started to see things, faces in the cardboard, hands reaching out, eyes staring at me from the darkness. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. My keycard was dead. My phone was dead. The walkie was dead. I was trapped. The boxes began to shake, slamming against each other. The sound deafening. I screamed, but no one heard me. The lights went out. In the darkness, I felt hands grabbing me, pulling me toward the boxes. I fought, kicking and screaming, but they were too strong. They dragged me into the center of the warehouse, into the circle of boxes. I felt something cold and wet wrap around my neck, pulling me down. I closed my eyes, refusing to look. The voices were all around me now, whispering secrets, promises, threats. "Look at us, Tyler, look at us." I kept my eyes shut, but I could feel them pressing in on me, their breath cold against my skin. I don't know how long I was there. When I opened my eyes, the boxes were gone. I was alone in the warehouse, lying on the cold concrete floor. Ms. Grant was standing over me, her expression unreadable. "You did well," she said. "Most people don't make it this far." She handed me another envelope. I took it, my hands shaking. "What's in the boxes?" I asked. She smiled. You don't want to know. I left the warehouse, the envelope clutched in my hand. I told myself I wouldn't go back, but the next night, I was there again. That I wish I could say I was strong enough to walk away. I wish I could say I found a better job, or that I called the police, or that I even told someone, anyone, what was happening in that warehouse. But the truth is, the money kept coming, and the world outside those concrete walls felt less and less real with every shift. My life shrank to a single point: survive the night, collect the envelope, try not to think about the boxes. The routine became everything. I'd arrive just before midnight, the warehouse looming out of the darkness like a tombstone. Miss Grant would be waiting, always with that same cold smile, always with a new envelope. She never asked how I was, never commented on the dark circles under my eyes or the way my hands shook when I took the money. She'd just hand me the clipboard, remind me of the rule, and disappear into her office. The warehouse itself seemed to change, night by night. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The boxes multiplied, or maybe they just moved around when I wasn't looking. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement, a flash of pale skin, a hand with too many fingers. I stopped trying to make sense of it. I stopped trying to make sense of anything. I started talking to myself, just to hear another voice. I'd narrate my rounds, muttering under my breath as I checked the doors and windows. North door secure, east window secure, boxes still there. Sometimes I'd laugh, a dry, humorless sound that echoed off the concrete walls. Sometimes I'd cry. The voices in the boxes never stopped. They whispered to me, called my name, promised me things I didn't want. Sometimes they'd beg, sometimes they'd threaten, sometimes they'd just laugh, a sound that made my skin crawl. One night, I found a note taped to my chair. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. You're doing well, Tyler. Keep following the rule. Don't look at the boxes. F. Frank. I hadn't seen him since that first night. I wondered what had happened to him. I wondered if he was still alive. I tried to ask Ms. Grant, but she just smiled and handed me my envelope. The nights blurred together. I stopped keeping track of the days. I stopped answering my phone, stopped checking my email. My friends stopped calling. My landlord stopped knocking. The world outside the warehouse faded away, replaced by the endless cycle of darkness, cold, and fear. One night, I arrived to find the warehouse empty. No Ms. Grant, no clipboard, no envelope. Just the boxes, stacked in the center of the floor, closer than ever. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding. For a moment, I considered leaving. But something held me there, something stronger than fear or desperation. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft click. The lights flickered, then went out. I stood in the darkness, listening to the boxes moving, sliding across the floor. The voices were louder than ever, a chorus of whispers that filled the air. Tyler, Tyler, Tyler. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside my head now, echoing through my thoughts. Look at us, Tyler. Look at us. I stumbled forward, hands outstretched, trying to find my chair. But the boxes were everywhere, pressing in on me from all sides. I could feel their cold, wet breath on my skin, could hear their laughter in my ears. That I fell to my knees, shaking. Please, I whispered. Just leave me alone. The voices laughed. You don't belong here, Tyler. You never did. I closed my eyes, trying to block them out. But the images came anyway, faces in the darkness, hands reaching out, eyes staring at me from the shadows. I don't know how long I was there. Time lost all meaning. The only thing that mattered was not looking, not giving in to the pull. At some point, the lights came back on. I was alone in the warehouse, the boxes gone. My chair was waiting for me, the clipboard on the seat. I sat down, my body aching. I picked up the clipboard and flipped through the checklist. Everything was the same as always: doors, windows, perimeter. But at the bottom, Someone had added a new item. Asterisk asterisk, don't look at the boxes. I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the walls. I checked the box, just like always. The rest of the night passed in a blur. When the sun came up, Ms. Grant was waiting by the door, envelope in hand. You did well, she said. See you tonight. I took the money and left. That day, I tried to sleep, but the voices wouldn't let me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the whispers in my head. Look at us, Tyler. Look at us. I got up, made coffee, stared out the window at the empty street. I thought about calling someone, telling them what was happening. But what would I say? That I was being haunted by boxes? That I was losing my mind? Maybe I was. That night, I went back to the warehouse. The boxes were waiting for me, stacked in a perfect circle around my chair. The caution tape was gone. I sat down, hands shaking. The voices started immediately, louder than ever. Tyler, Tyler, Tyler. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. I tried to focus on the checklist, on the routine. North door secure, east window secure. Boxes still there. But the boxes were moving now, sliding across the floor, closing in around me. I stood up, backing away. The boxes followed, pressing in on all sides. I stumbled, fell to my knees. The boxes loomed over me, their shadows stretching across the floor. Look at us, Tyler. Look at us. I closed my eyes, shaking my head. No, I won't. The boxes laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. You can't ignore us forever, Tyler. Sooner or later, everyone looks. I pressed my hands over my eyes, trying to block them out. But the images came anyway, faces in the darkness, hands reaching out, eyes staring at me from the shadows. I screamed, but no one heard me. The lights went out. In the darkness, I felt hands grabbing me, pulling me toward the boxes. I fought, kicking and screaming, but they were too strong. They dragged me into the center of the warehouse, into the circle of boxes. I felt something cold and wet wrap around my neck, pulling me down. I closed my eyes, refusing to look. The voices were all around me now, whispering secrets, promises, threats. Look at us, Tyler. Look at us. I kept my eyes shut, but I could feel them pressing in on me, their breath cold against my skin. I don't know how long I was there. When I opened my eyes, the boxes were gone. I was alone in the warehouse, lying on the cold concrete floor. A mess. Grant was standing over me, her expression unreadable. You did well, she said. Most people don't make it this far. She handed me another envelope. I took it, my hands shaking. What's in the boxes? I asked. She smiled. You don't want to know. I left the warehouse, the envelope clutched in my hand. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But the next night, I was there again. The cycle continued. Night after night, the same routine, the same fear, the same voices. I stopped trying to fight it. I stopped trying to leave. The warehouse became my world. The boxes became my only companions. Sometimes, I think about the life I used to have. I think about my friends, my family, the world outside. But it all feels like a dream, something that happened to someone else. All that matters now is the rule that don't look at the boxes. One night, I arrived to find the warehouse empty. No boxes, no chair, no clipboard. Just darkness. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding. The lights flickered, then came on. In the center of the warehouse, a single box sat on the floor. I walked toward it, unable to stop myself. The box was small, unmarked, ordinary. I knelt down, hands shaking. The voices were silent. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cardboard. I wanted to look inside. I needed to look inside, but I remembered the rule. Don't look at the boxes. I stood up, backing away. The box sat there, silent and still. I turned and walked out of the warehouse, the door closing behind me. I never went back. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the voices in my dreams. Look at us, Tyler. Look at us. but I never do. I never will.